to subsequent to having that chat, we'll then move over to Stephanie Tull, who's joining us from Sydney Trains and having a past experience of working in construction. And then finally, we'll have a chat to Jason from Lend-Lease. So that will then have our three speakers unpack their sort of core topics, key messages, and then we'll finish off with a bit of a discussion between the group of us. And that will be that chance to answer those questions that come through from yourselves across the time. So in the interest of time and getting things underway, first and foremost, thank you to the speakers. Thank you to everyone joining us today. We'll kick off with an acknowledgement of country. So just want to acknowledge that I'm hosting and recording this meeting from the lands of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. I also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands on which you all work today and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people participating in this webinar. Pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging, and celebrate the diversity of Aboriginal peoples and their ongoing cultures and connections to the lands and waters of Australia. So today we're covering off on construction, a very big industry in Australia, one of the major contributors in the way that we drive our economy. And it is continuing to be a major pillar, especially when we think about all these significant infrastructure projects that are being called upon to help us shoulder the burden of COVID. So given its significance, it is sobering to learn that construction industry still continues to face a very significant and uphill battle when it comes to workforce health management. These challenges continue to be perpetuated by complications such as having a very diverse workforce, which is implicated by skills and resource shortages. We've got the commercial complexities of unrealistic project undertakings and multifaceted work arrangements that have quite significant knock-on effects. So we're looking at how in government, as employers, as providers, and as a broader community, how can we continue to work through doing a better job of supporting those participants in the construction industry. I think you all agree with me and share my sentiments that we all want to be able to go to work and come away from work happy and healthy and not feel that we are in any way disadvantaged because of the chosen working sector that we may participate in. So there is an opportunity that remains for the industry, that construction that is, to continue to come together and better solve the challenges of workplace health. And that's why we've decided to conduct the forum we have today, because we want to be able to put all of our heads together and have a bit of a chance to think through what it is we might be able to do to better support the working participants of the construction industry. So today we'll be hearing from our colleagues that are directly operating within and tackling the known challenges of construction. So that is the Mates in Construction team, Brad and Kate. It's Stephanie from Sydney Trains in a past life having worked at Janellen, and also Jason, who comes and joins us from the team at Lend-Lease. So all bring a wealth of knowledge to the table, and I just would like to thank them in advance for your time and contribution, guys. I know how busy it is at the moment. It feels like no one has a spare second. So to give a full hour to this session, we're hugely grateful, and really want to say thank you for your generous offering of time and knowledge. So without further ado, what I'll do is I'll throw to the team of Brad and Kate from Mates in Construction. So Brad is the current CEO of Mates in Construction, the position, Mates in Construction for New South Wales. I should make sure I get that correct. A position he's held since October 2017. Brad's primary role is to implement the Mates in Construction program to raise awareness of mental health issues and provide support for prevention strategies to reduce the suicide rates within the construction industry. Kate, joining Brad, is one of the case managers there within Mates in Construction. Kate operates as a case manager that currently delivers suicide prevention training to the construction industry and undertakes case management with vulnerable individuals within the industry. So today, the team from Mates in Construction will be exploring the conversation of mental health and suicide and its prevalence within construction. And how can we better identify with those in need, and how the Mates in Construction program has sought to combat these challenges. So that's probably enough from me for the moment. Brad, I might invite you to kick things off and just tell us a little bit more about Mates in Construction and how you're seeking to positively influence the construction landscape.
Thank you, Alistair. And I want to thank everybody that's viewing in today. And just to say that when we generally start off talking about our program, we are cognizant of the fact that we do talk about suicide, not so badly on this occasion, but that, when we're doing this sort of stuff, that we make sure that people do connect to help if the conversation gets a little bit tough for them. And there's plenty of ways to do that. And you can ring the Matesy Construction Helpline on 1300 642 111, apart from many others, Lifeline and so forth. I want to just start by going back to the start with Mates and talk about how it got started very quickly. There's these redundancy trust funds that exist within the top end of the commercial industry. There is a trust fund, and they're state-based, so they're autonomous in each state. There's a state-based one in Queensland called BERT, Building Employees Redundancy Trust. Why I signal them out, because they were a big part of contributing to Mates getting started. They were looking between 1999 to 2007, the death claims component of their trust fund. That is all kinds of deaths, so an insurance component, all kinds of deaths inside and outside of work. Between those years, they had 399 death claims that came across their desk. Out of those 399, 88 were suicides. And they thought, well, that's a bit disproportionate. Maybe we should investigate this a bit further. So they commissioned Griffith University. Actually, it was within Griffith University is the Australian Institute of Suicide Research and Prevention, commonly known as ASRAP or ASRAP. They commissioned a study for them to look at suicides. That study came up with a number of things, but what it found that we were disproportionate to other parts of Australia. But they also found, and I'm not going to steal any of Kate's thunder because she may talk about this around her case management, but one of the things they found that was significant, there was 93% of construction workers who had suicided in the past never sought any professional help. So they didn't know where to find it, or they didn't want to, or the big one was they weren't encouraged to. So that's what the premise of the Matesy Construction program was built on. So we basically teach construction workers, or we provide training in the industry for all of industry, not just the blue collar sector, but the white collar sector as well, on site and on the ground, providing skills of what to look for. So when someone's doing it tough emotionally or in emotional distress, so what we need to look for. Then we ask them to have a think about what we can do about it. So we then talk about how you can keep someone safe while connecting them to help, which is a very important thing. We've currently trained in Australia, so all over the country, over 228,000 people within our industry. We have over 20,000 connectors currently that have done that 4-hour training about keeping someone safe while connecting them to help. Very important. So it is about creating that network of carers within the industry to combat the problem. We're more than just a training exercise though. We provide a 24/7 helpline, as I said earlier, which is like Lifeline for construction workers. We provide case management, and I'll let Kate talk about that. But I might just say one of the beautiful things about our case management is, and what I like what Kate does, is that we are not the counselling service. We don't seek to be the mental health professionals. We don't seek to be the psychologist or the psychiatrist. We are just that bridge that's never been built in between. So what Kate will do with her case management is she will ask them, she'll give them a number of options. So those people that need our support, she will give them a number of options, and then they will decide out of those options what they need to do. Because that's important about that they feel as that they have a bit of control over what's going on with them. But also Kate's always following up and ensuring that they're getting the support that they get. We're evidence-based, research-based. So we have a number of academics around the country from all kinds of universities. who are constantly looking and reviewing and evaluating our program, and ensuring that we are keeping pace with industry, we are keeping pace with what's happening within the mental health suicide prevention space. We're probably underfunded, I've got to say, and this is not it probably is a bit of a pitch, but here's just to tell you that around 65% of our funding in New South Wales comes from industry. The rest comes from a federal government grant. We can't currently keep up with industry demand. We're in constant demand for what we do, which is a good thing for us, but it just tells you that, and look, maybe there's a silver lining here with, the budget and what came out in the budget and all that money that was dedicated by, and I commend the federal government for doing it, for putting some money into that, especially workplace programs like ours, where we're really active on the ground. So there's a lot of people competing in this space around the mental health suicide prevention stuff, and you probably all know their names, but where we sort of make a bit of a difference is that we're very active. We're very active on the ground doing all that great work. We fit neatly into the New South Wales government's initiative or strategy towards zero suicides. We accommodate that very well about what we do and how we do things. But I didn't want to bang on forever, Alistair. I didn't know how long you wanted me to speak for, but I might leave it there for now and leave a lot of time for people to ask us questions, because I'm very happy to ask those questions.
Yeah, I think that's a good call. And I think, look, everyone very much appreciates the work that's being done by people like Mates in Construction, and understand that the prevalence of mental health is only becoming, on the increase, and we all want to try and curb that. So I think that's probably a chance for me to ask a question of yourself, Kate, as to what are you finding behind the statistics? So what are the stories that are making their way to you? What is leading these people to needing mental health support?
I think, like most or any workplace, when you've got things that are happening at home, and you may not be, if you've got relationship issues or some drug and alcohol issues, those sort of things at home, some of that stuff's going to come with you into the workplace. And I would say that the number one issue that's referred to me time and time again would be stemming from relationship issues. And from that, it might be there's been a separation, they've lost their home, they've got legal issues, they've now got custody issues. And just from one event, all of a sudden, everything snowballed sort of out of control. And I think you put that on top of the industry that people are working in, where construction is different than other industries, where you are doing really long hours, you're out in the elements every day. Most people are working themselves out of a job every 6 months, because each time a project finishes, it's like, well, do I have another job after this? How does that go with even just your financial management in the home? Like the stress of, can the mortgage be paid beyond that, because I'm not sure what's happening sort of in that next phase. Unfortunately, the construction industry does have quite a culture of heavy alcohol and drug use, and that often comes through and has then exacerbated other problems. Culture of bullying, it's a male-dominated area. Statistically, through our research, women do communicate better and talk better, and that has shown that, when you do have women in a workplace, and often, there are a lot of women in construction, but we're often in like the social work roles, the HR roles, those sort of, stereotypical kind of female roles, but not so much sort of out on the tools where, that can kind of create an area where men can actually have more of a conversation about what's happening at home or whatever that might be. And a big part of what Mates does is about those communication skills and the conversations that you're having with your workmates at work, because that's who you're spending such a large percentage of time with. But, I think the key things that we do see, as I said, are relationships, drug and alcohol, family breakdown, those kind of things, which then once you turn up to work and you're carrying all of that load with you, it's impacting on your concentration. It's impacting on people actually attending work. You might be turning up late, not attending at all, absenteeism, presenteeism, all of those sort of things that then have that flow on cost in the workplace. So I think that combination of the mental health and then the unique aspects of construction, and yeah, it can be a bit of a boiling pot for people. And as Brad said, a lot of the guys, they will put up their hand for help, but they don't actually know who they can go to. So I guess that's where we come in, trying to give them that space to find that it is actually okay to reach out and talk to somebody. It doesn't have to be us. It can be your supervisor. It can be the guy next door. It could be anybody, but just, promoting that putting your hand up attitude.
Okay. And would that be something that at the moment we would suggest is not happening in the construction industry, and hence mates being born in the late 90s to say we need to be having more active conversations? Where do we go? This federal budget's potentially giving us, a lot of ammunition to really be able to correct for potentially, past indiscretions. Where do you guys see it heading?
I also think that, I think we are fortunate, if that's the right way to put it, that from COVID, mental health has become a little bit like we have got more of a vocal point from that, whereas previously I don't think mental health was as discussed in the media and things like that. So over the last, I think, 12 months, 18 months, whatever, it has certainly been more at the forefront and acknowledged that it is an area that needs, more traction, I guess, and more funding to go into it. So whoever gets funding, that's fantastic, because we're all in this together to support people.
I just want to add, we are, some people see us as a workplace program, which we are, but we're also a community program, because what we're teaching goes back to their loved ones, families, friends, neighbours, community. So we teach these skills, but it's spread widely. It's spread massively widely. So I think, what we're trying to achieve is more a community program rather than just our workplace. But construction is leading the way. The research tells you that we've reduced suicides by nearly 8%, 7.9%. And the research is ongoing to have a look at that. I think that the MATES program improves morale, it improves productivity, it improves safety, that psycho-safety relationship. If your mind's not on the job, you're not only a risk to yourself, but everybody else working around you. So I think it does amazing stuff for our industry, but also the community.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with you, considering that statistic of actually knowing that you're proactively improving what's going on with suicide. I think we know more broadly, suicide unfortunately is increasing, not decreasing across our communities. So, hats off to the industry for being able to curb that trend already. Fingers crossed it continues to head that way. Look, we might leave the guys from Mates in Construction for a little bit. Thank you very much for giving us your time and insights. I'm going to hand over now to Stephanie Tull. So Stephanie's joining us from Sydney Trains as a safety professional or a QSE manager, having been worked directly with the construction industry for more than 5 years now. Steph in his time has directly tackled improving safety cultures and experienced the full breadth of safety complications whilst working at places of employment such as Ganellan. So specifically, Steph today is going to be talking to us about developing operational accountabilities and linking in that female perspective, which was sort of touched upon there by Kate, that female perspective within a male-dominant industry. So Steph, I'll chuck to you now. Perhaps let's start by hearing a little bit more around your work health safety management journey and how that's been linked to construction thus far.
Thanks, Alistair. Sorry, I apologise everyone, my voice is a little bit croaky, so apologise in advance if I sound a bit off. Look, thanks for everyone for joining us today. So look, my journey actually started, I was a registered nurse first. I actually worked in intensive care, and within that time, I actually seen a lot of workplace injuries, not only from nurses, but also because we did have construction workers that would come to intensive care from injuries that sustained at work. One example I can give you was a worker was walking past and a bolt, as like I said, M12 bolt, was a number of stories up. He was wearing his hard hat at the time. He's just walked past. Obviously, it's fallen from a height and it's actually landed on his head. And he actually had to go for surgery. Look, he survived and all that. But, it was really interesting looking at, well, how does this happen in the construction industry? What can we do about it? And just sparked my interest a lot. So I then ended up into studying my master's in safety. Worked a bit at the Wollongong Council in programs trying to reduce manual handling injuries to the workforce there. And then started my career more in construction. So I worked at Janellen, worked my way from safety coordinator to manager. And then recently I've now been in Sydney Trains the last year. So it's been quite a journey, and very interesting to see, I guess, the behaviours and perception of people in safety and changing that behaviour that they have and the opinion they have on safety and driving it to be better. Yeah, that was about it on that. I will touch more on the other examples later on.
Yeah, for sure. So look, Steph, when we chatted, we obviously went through some of the challenges that present as being a safety professional is sometimes, unfortunately, we're needing to change people's mindsets. Sometimes safety is not seen as the easiest or the necessary thing to do. People just want to get the job done, right?
Yeah.
So how did you go about changing some of the mindsets of those operational working groups? Groups that we know are particularly stoic, potentially don't want to be told to do things in an alternate way. What did you do? How did you sort of work through some of those harder elements of change?
So look, there's a couple of things. Firstly, it's actually changing the mindset of top management, because if you aren't able to change their mindsets and change their leadership and approach, then it's not going to feed down. So starting from there first, making sure you're addressing with them. So certain things like making sure that you have adequate safety resources on site for each of those projects. So, where I come from, they had the view that they had cadetship programs and they would put them through safety roles and wanted to produce them up into overall better, say, project engineers, etc. However, what that showed was there was a lack of, say, knowledge and people that wanted to actually do the role in safety. So there was a lot of changing and influencing and negotiating with top management about, listen, this is what's benchmarked in the industry. This is what you can see in tier 1 companies. So we would show, as I would say, safety resources and the number you would need on project sites or within the business. And then the other thing was just changing culture, as in little things like, where is safety talked about? Is it only talked about at pre-work briefings and toolbox talks, or is it talked about throughout the organisation? So, we had safety meetings at a very high level, but what we started introducing, what I introduced with them was making sure that talked about at the project meetings. So even having a separate meeting for safety, we would start integrating things like talking about the alerts that we release in the organisation, the statistics and injuries we have at organisation, what they were doing about it. And what that created really fostered for the project manager in that project to look at safety programs for their site to try and introduce to overall reduce the, say, injuries they were having on that site. Even things like making sure when you're talking about safety, it's the first agenda item at a meeting. So if you really want to show leadership and really change the culture, it's about making sure that that is your first priority and talking about it at the meeting first. So that was some of the things. Then when it came to looking on a site level and, doing with the blue collar workforce, it was about engaging the workers. Some workers genuinely, because there's obviously different multicultural backgrounds as well, some workers genuinely didn't understand, maybe some of the compliance. So it was about educating them. And a lot of the time it's just, they want to get to know who you are. So it was about having, just conversations, getting to know who they were, what are they like doing on the weekend, talking about the footy, things like that, things to get their buy-in. Once we had their buy-in, it was about influencing that change. So, it would be general discussions, having contractor meetings where safety was talked about at those meetings and giving them set KPIs. So say with, one of the formwork contractors, we would have set meetings with them and saying, okay, well, show me how you're performing and giving me, your backropping inspection reports or anything like that to make sure that they were being held accountable as well. And just some of the other things throughout the workforce. So obviously being a female in the industry, it has its good and bad points. And so making sure you can really connect with your own staff on that project side. So it was more about, we might do a local lunch, or we might go go-karting to create that bonding experience. And what they really allowed was they get to know you at a personal level. And what that created was they felt more at ease to be able to go to myself or any other safety professional and not think that it was always a police sort of approach. It was more that we were there willing to help them. And that's the whole idea. Like, safety needs to work as a team with the team, and they need to be part of the team. When they're separate, it's very hard to introduce and make safety compliant. So I found those things really, really helpful for me in the industry.
Yeah, great. And look, it sounds like there's a lot of shared learnings in terms of the way that you've approached that, similar to the way the guys at Mates in Construction looking to approach it. I think we understand that you can't just push safety down onto people and just expect that they'll accept that. It needs to be something that they need to understand, that what's in it for me, and then you create that buy-in. So no, that's really it's really interesting to hear. So look, I appreciate that, in a summary, it can all sound great, but there would have undoubtedly been some bumps along the road. Are you able to sort of talk us through, some of those challenges you faced? What was the nature of those challenges within the construction world, and how we can potentially all learn from that safety leadership you ultimately demonstrated?
Yeah, look, there's no doubt there's still a little bit of a stigma that production comes first when it shouldn't. It's always safety before production. And I think a lot of it is about influencing, again, top management to show, well, if you were to actually incorporate safety from the beginning, from procurement stage, making sure you're selecting the right contractors, they've got scoring matrices so that you know that they're providing you an adequate level of safety. You've got accountability set out in their contracts so that you can hold them accountable for safety. Those sort of benchmarks help you drive the safety culture. It was very hard at the beginning to influence that to top management. Look, obviously I did experience a fatality in my workplace, and I was trying to drive that before, but unfortunately, until they actually had seen firsthand what happens in a crisis, and then you have to answer in front of the regulator, and you have to tell a family that sorry, your son's not coming home. It became very real. So it was a lot easier after that to drive safety. But again, it's about influencing that. It's not going to be a hindrance. It should just be as part of the program and built in, so that it's not going to cause extra costs. It's actually going to reduce delays. So what the benefit of explaining to top management was, well, hey, if you actually put all these controls in at the beginning of the project, you'll actually reduce the likelihood of a serious incident occurring. And what that does is that shows that, this is actually the cost benefit of you missing out on a job or having your job delayed because of a serious incident, versus actually having those factors built into the contract and program. So management did really see that towards the end. A lot of the things as well, management do look at their competitors and what their clients are after. So that was another avenue how I was managed to get things across the line. And I would say, well, hey, look out in the industry, tier one contractors and the projects they're winning, they've got these PPE guidelines. So what I did was I would look at data from our organization and present it to them. And what we found was that, there's a lot of eye injuries happening because we didn't have mandatory safety glasses. So I was able to pull that data. And so what I'm saying is, when you're able to pull data and statistics and show it black and white to top management, it's very powerful. So I was able to do that and put forward a case study to show, well, here's out in the industry and these are the projects they're winning at this value. If this is where you want to benchmark and go to, this is what you would need to do. So we're actually successful in implementing mandatory safety glasses and long pants by the end of last year or the year before. Yeah. So that's another option. And then with the client side, the client wants to see, well, what sort of KPIs are you doing in safety for your business, or, you know, what sort of programs you're doing. So that's another avenue to benchmark and say, well, hey, I would like to implement these programs. This would be really beneficial to show the client, so that we can win future work. So this was some of the ways we were able to also win projects in the future. So look, that was some of the ways I managed to try and change that culture. And the biggest one for, I think, the site guys was enforcing and outlining to top management what is due diligence under the WHS responsibilities and WHS Act, explaining that to them and showing that, you know, as a leader, you need to be aware and up to date with current WHS knowledge and information. And then showing that through bringing the top management and directors to site, and we'd have KPIs once a month. They would have to come out and they would undertake an inspection with the project manager or site manager on site. So it was really good for the younger staff and, you know, foremen, etc., to see on site that top leadership was coming out and actually taking an interest into, you know, why there may be delays and the concerns, and assisting them through that. So there's some of the things that did help.
Yeah, wonderful. And I think a great balance of commercial drivers, experiential data. You know, you really sort of hammered that one home. I'm not surprised that you've had the success you've had to get those changes to happen. Steph, I might park it there for the minute, and then we'll move over to Jason, and then we'll come back around for the discussion time. And just on that point, guys, if there is anyone that wants any questions, again, please utilise that chat function. Really keen to hear your questions so that we can get the group or the forum to be answering that. But anyway, without further ado, Jason Perrin from Lendlease. So Jason works in the injury care and recovery management space. Jason's an accredited exercise physiologist. He's worked across clinical populations, particularly specialising in musculoskeletal rehab, which we know is such a major aspect of construction-based injury. Prior to transitioning now into more that workplace injury management space, where he's been aligned to both blue and white collar populations. Jason's passionate about all things injury and illness recovery, and certainly recognises the impacts of physical rehab and how that plays on mental health. So yeah, look, Jason, in our chat today, you're going to be looking over Lendlease and the approach that's being taken there by the big tier one group that is Lendlease, and what you're doing in terms of proactive on-site engagement and facilitating that care culture, which we've already heard is so important across construction. So, mate, I'll let you start by telling us a little bit about your role within Lendlease and where your current areas of interest are as a group.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. So I'll probably start by saying one of the cool things since I've joined Lendlease is the title change. So it's gone from a generic injury manager / return to work coordinator to more align with what we actually do, is legitimate and genuine care for our employees' injuries and illnesses, and obviously helping them recover. So my role entails all aspects of that, from anything workers' comp related, work related, to the non-work related space. And at the moment, I'd say my portfolio probably consists of about 50-50 in terms of where it's spread. I suppose benefit of being in an organisation where it's an injury manager or someone with allied health or a lot of injury management experience looking after the non-work related injury and illness is it helps to firstly jump on the forefoot and get that early intervention straight away, and then potentially mitigate workers' comp risk and the stress that comes with it for the worker, and hopefully leading to a better recovery and a better outcome for everybody. Part of my role as not just managing the injuries and illnesses themselves, but being a subject matter expert for the wider business for anything injury related. And what we do is we provide holistic advice and just the overall management of anything related to it to ensure it's as safe and as durable as possible. We drive and implement injury management initiatives. So these are things that will come together as a team and sort of identify data, identify trends, and see what's sort of going on before developing and implementing said initiatives. In same sort of part of the early intervention sort of process, and more than just supporting the teams and each individual stakeholder throughout the various parts of our business, we support them through the challenges that it comes with working with individuals who are ill or injured. So obviously, not everyone's completely well versed in how to have some of the conversations, and somebody might come to them, particularly if it's a site manager or someone that's a people manager, and not knowing how to address or approach both physical and the mental components that come with any injury or illness. So we're there to support them in that aspect as well.
Awesome. Thanks, mate. And look, I think there's a notion of care that's really sort of come across in each of the conversations that we've talked through with the three lots of speakers. I guess my question is, given your role and that connection to care, why is it that construction potentially need that high level of care? Like, I work across many industries, and construction is one where it always seems to come back that we need to care for these working populations more. Can you give me some insight as to why you think that is?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's been mentioned a few times, right? So it's obviously a high risk injury from a physical perspective and a psychological perspective, given the data and the statistics that's around suicide or mental health. So they certainly, every industry needs it, but it's definitely needed in construction with the data there to present it. When we're looking after not only acute physical and psychological injuries that can come out of the work and the stresses of the job, but also the chronic nature of some things. And obviously, particularly with the physical stuff, the nature of the role leads to nature and conditions type injury and illness. So certainly doing things that we can, or as best we can, to mitigate that, prevent it and assist. And although it may not fully stop anything occurring, it's what we do at the beginning when we know about it that can help. The long hours, the tight deadlines. I've never had to really deal with a tight deadline until I've been dealing with certain people and different projects being here, and to see the stresses that they go through, and you can literally see it on their face, how much it impacts them. And it doesn't just stay at work. It's what's happening at work is being taken home, and then vice versa, as sort of Steph said as well, with the relationship stuff. So whatever is impacting them here is certainly impacting them at home. So we want to be able to try and do our best to get that. I suppose, from a care perspective from Lend-Lease, we're really trying to just facilitate a culture of openness, and for it to really be genuine. I worked at a workers' compensation insurer and have dealt with many employers, and you can see that there's a lot of companies do speak about our people are our greatest asset, but I've often found that that's never come to fruition, or it's not what is truly genuine. And I'm hand on heart proud to say that is certainly Lend-Lease. And whatever we can do is being done to help our workers with their injury and illness. I think why it's important for construction workers as well is just given the demographic, right? Like, we know there's going to be blue collar, traditionally white men who take that notion of she'll be right. So it's passed on. We don't get the early intervention, we don't get the outcomes, we don't get the recovery, because they just tend to deal with it. And that's noticeable from physical and psychological. And we know how much of a hindrance that is going to be to a positive outcome. And it's been one of my biggest challenges, is trying to get people to come forward proactively and seek help when they need it, because that she'll be right mentality is so far ingrained. And it's something that we continue to work on, and certainly something I'm passionate about changing, and as is my entire team.
Yeah, right. That's I think we'll come back to that as a group, the whole she'll be right thing, because I know that is that's a conversation in of itself, because you're right, I think it's generational and it's been around for a very, very long time. What I might ask is that you touched upon certain data points that you use, like your workers' comp claims, your natures and conditions, acknowledging types of injuries that come onto your radar. So what is it that you've done with that data to help lead certain interventions within Lend-Lease? Like, I know you guys are very proud of that proactive, open approach. What are some of those data sets that you've used, and how have they influenced what you've led?
Yeah, so I suppose, as most companies probably would, particularly the larger ones, data is quite important, right? As Stephanie mentioned also. We track both work-related, non-work-related, and we go through those trends and see what are the biggest sort of pain points, the hot spots, and try and make our initiatives towards those. So something that I know the team is quite proud of is the stretch and flex program, which has been rolled out as part of our pre-start. It took a bit of time to, sort of get going, but now there's a huge appetite from the business when they've been able to see the positive impact that it is having. So, we'll go out and we'll present the program to the sites and try and get some of the workers there to be the champions. What we've found works a lot better is, instead of, here's management coming, or here's people from the ivory tower coming, telling us what works and what doesn't, presenting this data and telling us we need to do this every morning. We try and really get the buy-in from some particular workers that we know have a lot of respect within that site, and that sort of builds to the camaraderie that they all have. And if it's being led by one of their own, quote unquote, we've found a lot more buy-in from that. So, we can go out, we've presented the data, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but really having that buy-in and those champions has been sort of the critical factor, I think. Not only that from a musculoskeletal perspective, but we have our own internal health and wellbeing unit that's whole sole purpose is health and wellbeing programs, called Foundation. So they've been critical in providing all of the early intervention stuff and the ongoing stuff the workers have access to. And it's all, we've got the obviously EAP, which most companies will do. We've got a bunch of other psychological resources, including an Uprise program, a huge amount of mental health first aiders and real buy-in for mental health first aid, sleep fit programs, skin and health checks, nutrition. And we found that making them voluntary is really important, giving a worker or an employee autonomy to make their own decision, but also making sure they're presented with as much of the information we can, and using the data to show them, and really hitting home with some of the critical points that we talk about has been very helpful.
Yeah, cool. That's really good. And I really like the way that you sort of thread in the concept of autonomy. I think, none of us would want to be directed to do anything, particularly in connection to our health. I think we're all very guarded as to our health. So to try and mandate that someone has to do a certain something about their health in connection to their workplace, I think is fraught with danger. And I'm not surprised that autonomy approach is working really well. So
absolutely. And it's about, I suppose, a real factor that's really helped us is our on-site involvement and engagement. I'm proud to come to this business and actually be out on the projects themselves and being amongst all of the workers, building a rapport. And sometimes it just takes a familiar face to be there, that's somebody they can just go and talk to. And often we find that we can almost be like a triage service, and somebody will come to us for something, let's just say non-work related, and we have the resources to point them in the right direction and support them once they do start going in that direction, because there'll often be questions that come back, and we're usually the first people that they do come to once they feel comfortable with us, which is great.
Right. So you've really built that organisational trust in terms of you're there to support people, and through obviously that notion of care. Is there any way that you'd recommend that others on this call that might be seeking to emulate efforts around that whole care discussion? Is there ways that you deliberately picked certain occupational hygiene or wellness factors for like the physical, the psychological? Like, are there things that you did for certain working groups that will work versus this working group that will work? Like, I'm taking it that there's going to be a contextual element to the way you guys did this.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say from a pragmatic perspective, just firstly facilitating a culture of transparency and acceptedness. So having reporting injuries early straight away and not being vilified or shunted because of it, knowing that when you come forward with an injury or an illness, work-related or not, that you'll be looked after and you'll be supported and you will have that care aspect there. I find that if there's not that trust, that nobody's going to come forward, and often it'll be months down the track when something's identified that's almost sometimes too far gone. So we really want to make sure that they understand that early intervention is critical and we want to help in whatever way we can. I suppose the post-COVID or intra-COVID world has sort of helped with the mental health stuff, and I feel that it's much more spoken about now and becoming more accepted, and because it is spoken about, it's not such a taboo. So even for myself, noticing the guys on site that ordinarily wouldn't even speak about anything mental health related are talking about it, and there's posters up and they're talking about it amongst each other. And then coming forward when they do. There's a lot of work to be done, but it's certainly getting there. In terms of contextual, yeah, you're definitely right, Alistair. We've got different business units throughout Lendlease, and although I look after building that we have, retirement living in our services part, and they're definitely going to be contextual. I would say that the approach is going to be similar in terms of the transparency, the genuineness, but it's so dynamic. It's changing all the time, particularly post-COVID world. Everything is changing quite quickly. So it's about how quickly we can adapt to that. And there's going to be trial and error, but we're doing our best.
Yeah, for sure. Mate, doing very well. I can attest to that, having worked with the Lendlease brand for a very long time. What I might do now is, Liz, I might just ask that you take the team at Mates in Construction and Steph off mute. We'll get everyone into a bit of an open forum and discussion. Something I've really picked up on in the chats so far is that real collab effort, and it's being something that it's not a top-down strategy. It can't be purely bottom-up either, because you don't have buy-in, it doesn't happen. Brad, I might start with you in terms of the successes that you've obviously had in bringing Mates in Construction into the forums that you've been able to lead them into. What was the key trigger? What was the thing that, Mates was able to do that potentially other workplace programs or someone in-house isn't able to do?
So I think, well, for credibility purposes, so when they set it up, they decided they would constantly evaluate the program. So that was very important, having those academics around the country that are professionals within that field, inviting them in to do the research, and for us to then reflect on that research and ensure that the program was sustainable and the program was meeting what the industry wanted. But I think the big issue why Mates is so successful is because it brings everyone together. It is that collective response. I often say to people, mental health can be viewed, suicide prevention can be viewed as very complex issues, but they may be not so complex to fix, because if you're really giving people some quick skills about, making them feel comfortable about opening up about their emotional issues, but also making them feel comfortable who they can go to. So the problem is, in the past, we've had a hierarchical structure that says, you will have to go here to deal with this problem. Whereas what we're saying is, it is the people, we say within our industry, you spend more time at work with your work colleagues than you do with your loved ones, family or friends. So we think you're best placed to notice a lot of these problems that are cropping up. But we also want to make them feel comfortable about who they can go to. And I think that is the key, that they felt comfortable enough to be able to start talking about their emotional issues, but also seek help. So it is about help seeking. It is about, help offering. It is both those things, where men in the past have not been good at it. And just on the women issue with Stephanie, I often say, and Kate, has a bit of a laugh about me about this, about the feminists within our industry. They see me as a key, because I often say a higher female participation in our industry can actually lead to saving more lives, because women are naturally very good at communicating their emotional issues, where us men are not very good at it. So I think that having more women participate in our industry can actually help reduce suicides.
But also being an independent charity, because we are independent, people aren't going, well, I've got to go to my HR, or I've got to go to, we're separate from everybody, for them to feel comfortable to come forward and have that conversation as well.
Yeah, okay. So there's a bit of credibility in that, it's not in any kind of immediate to the workplace, where I probably would suspect there's that pessimism around things like an EAP provider, even people are still feeling that's connected to my employer, so I'm not sure. And that probably brings me to my next question, and Steph, I'll send it your way, because it's got that whole, she'll be right mentality wrapped up in it. what's your take on that whole she'll be right? And are we making progress in breaking down that sort of male hubris?
Yeah, I've heard that too many times. She'll be right. Or it won't happen to me. Oh, I've been doing this for 40 years. They're probably the main three ones that I hear. And to support on what Jason was already talking about, yeah, look, there's definitely a lot of work that's been happening in the construction industry. And look, and I even see it in the rail industry. We have the same issues with injuries, same sort of type, manual handling. And again, it's about getting it in early, managing the incident early, and providing those support services early. So I think before, look, there wasn't enough support in that space, like even to the fact that now I know my current organisation, we actually have on-site physio. So we're trying to promote workers to go to the physio even before they have an injury, just if they feel that, you know, something's not right, just to get assessed. So trying to get that before an injury occurs. Definitely there is progression that we're having in that space. And just other things, there's definitely a lot more manual handling programs, like as Jason touched on, and what we're doing, definitely doing stretch programs, trying to have manual handling champions out there to try and reduce injuries. But again, it's creating that awareness to the workforce that, hey, you know, you may have been here, let's say 40 years in the industry. Just because you're able to do something when you were 20 doesn't mean, you know, when you're 50, 60, you can do exactly the same thing. And it's about creating that situational awareness as well to the workforce that, you know, you do need to stop, reset, and assess what you're doing and the tasks you're doing before you actually undertake it. So that's some of the work we've been trying to do in my current workplace. So yes, to answer your questions, definitely moving in the right direction, but a lot more that still needs to occur.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, I think we are making headway.
Yeah.
And I think the more we're talking and the more that we're bringing the whole organisation into the conversation, the more likely we are to be successful. Jason, I'll dovetail across to you then in terms of that prevention being better than cure, and we're all, you know, very familiar with that, I think, across this call. Yet, if I go into most workplaces, still the data sets we talk about are things like lag indicators, my workers' comp claim rates, my, you know, natures and conditions types injuries. Is there anything that you're noticing in terms of changing that pattern of behaviour? Do you feel like we're moving in the right direction to get a better preventative strategy happening before the injury happens?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think even just in my short time that I've been here, I've noticed change and improvement, given that it's something that's constantly discussed and constantly looked at. And then, you know, you've got different sets of eyes coming in. I think it is something that's certainly happening. The benefit of Lend-Lease having the foundation business unit is that it's pretty much all preventative, and there's not too much that's in there that is reactive. So we certainly promote that as much as we can and try and get any of those programs involved as soon as possible whenever identified that would fit. But I do think it's on the right track. I think as an industry, construction's come a long way and is still got a bit to go, but are doing really well. And I think probably one of the forerunners, to be honest.
Right. Good to know it's a forerunner. I think construction's only going to get busier and busier as the infrastructure projects continue to charge ahead. Brad, I might throw to you guys. What's on the immediate horizon within Mates in Construction? What are you guys looking to achieve across the next 12 months?
The blueprint. Well, the blueprint. I was just saying to Kate earlier when we muted ourselves that I haven't mentioned the blueprint. So we embarked on an industry blueprint for better mental health and suicide prevention back in 2016. Actually, we brought everybody together along with Beyond Blue, so it's in partnership with them, to have a look at what is the benchmark that everybody can reach in the industry that will assist people. Now, the likes of Jason's organisation, so Lend-Lease, they probably are above benchmark, right? But there's a lot of subbies in the industry that are smaller businesses. There's some, you know, tier threes, other tiers, construction companies in the industry that are smaller, and they require some sort of assistance. So we have developed a blueprint and we've engaged a in Sydney here, we have a National Engagement Blueprint Manager who is Dr. Peggy Tropf. And she works with companies to be able to look at their systems of work and talk about how they can reach that blueprint benchmark and how they can best tackle mental health and suicide prevention. So, yeah, I want to acknowledge the blueprint that we have, and we can, you know, if you get in touch with us at Matey Construction, or have a look at our website at mates.org.au, you can have a look at the blueprint and how that's tracking along. Yeah, so we're at that implementation stage now at implementing the blueprint right across the industry. So that's one of the big things. The other thing is we're obviously engaging with state government here, and we're on most of those big civil infrastructure projects, the likes of, you know, Sydney Metro and WestConnex and others. So we're trying to get the word out there, I guess, and trying to spread. We do tend to spread ourselves a little thin. And as I said earlier, you know, if anybody's got any influence with some sort of funding coming our way or industry support, that'd be wonderful too. But yeah, I don't know if Kate wants to add to that. Okay, good.
No worries. No, very good to know. And yeah, I think the blueprint is always a great thing to have. I think in safety, we know that a well-made plan is certainly a great start to getting us some successes. So I wish you well in all of that. And look, that's about time in terms of running today's session. So all the speakers, thank you very much, guys, for giving your time, your thoughts, really good insights for us. There's just a note there that if there are any questions from you in the group, please do shoot them through to me. I'll get them answered, whether it's by Brad, Steph, or Jason. I know sometimes it can be hard to ask a question in a bit more of a public forum. So if you want to ask a private question, just contact me. More than happy to help you out in getting that sorted. But otherwise, thanks for your time and attendance, and wishing you all a great rest of the week.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
See ya.
Yeah.